Okay, so it's recording. So to start us off, Hillary is going to be going through the outline of today's call and the purpose, and then we'll go through an overview of the competition and get on with the questions. You want to take it away, Hillary?
Thanks, Shannon. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As Shannon mentioned, I'm the Events and Communications Coordinator. I've also helped out with our seed grant program and a couple of other things. So happy to be here. So the call is being recorded and it'll be posted hopefully to our website later on in the week. The first 15 minutes we're going to spend just for introduction and sort of a general overview of the competition for anybody that is not fully familiar with it, or just as a reminder of exactly what we're looking for. Then we're going to spend 25 minutes answering the questions that were emailed in and any questions that come up during the call. We will also spend the last sort of 20 minutes just in discussion on the current challenges that people are facing and sort of the impact of that. So that leads us to the purpose of this call. So essentially there are two purposes or two goals for us. The first is that COVID has really created a number of challenges in the landscape. And so we're really trying to identify the challenges that people might be having for the competition that are directly related to the COVID pandemic. And also make sure that we get enough information today to help us make an informed decision on the administration of it. So deadlines are clearly very important, and it's important that they're outlined, but if those deadlines can't be met due to some of the current circumstances, we need to understand that and we need to respond accordingly. And we can only do that with feedback from our stakeholders. So it's really important for us to gauge that, and it's really important for us to have a very clear understanding on reporting issues, on funding concerns, logistical issues, anything that might come up from this. So, and also to answer any questions. So the second goal is for us to just ask any questions. We really felt like it was an opportunity to connect with people and give them a platform to be able to get clear on anything that might not be clear, or to understand better the application process, what we're looking for, or anything else that might come up from that. So I'll shoot it back over to Shannon, but we really appreciate everybody joining us today.
Yeah, no, it's great that we have a pretty decent turnout. So just going to go through an overview of the competition itself. So we had three main objectives, and that's to support the training and recruitment of high quality personnel to Alberta, and support innovative and translational research for spinal cord injury, as well as to support provincial collaboration, to make sure that that research isn't happening in little silos in specific regions, but hopefully to expand it across the province. So the funding and term for this competition is we're supplying $25,000 in stipend support for a postdoctoral fellow for 1 year. This needs to be matched by a funding partner from the applicant for an additional $25,000 minimum. There is an opportunity to take that $50,000, so the $25,000 from us and $25,000 from the match funding partner, and use that and leverage it for a MyTax application for fellowship. And if that's the case, the term is going to be 2 years. So there are a few requirements for this competition. So it has to have that translational focus. So it has to have some consideration of translation of the research. So moving that knowledge throughout the translational spectrum or into application. There also must be provincial collaborations. This provincial collaboration doesn't have to be with another academic. It could be with a non-academic partner, such as a community group or a healthcare center. They just need to be in another municipality from you. And again, there's that requirement of match funding that has to be from a non-Alberta Paraplegic Foundations or Campus Alberta Neuroscience source. So the eligibility for applicants, they must be pursuing a spinal cord injury fellowship at an Alberta academic institution. Their supervisor must be a member of CAN or neuroscience research member. If they aren't, it's really easy. Just go to our website, sign up. Only takes a couple of minutes. And that faculty supervisor may not supervise more than one recipient. So you can't have more than one postdoc receiving this this funding from the same, who's being supervised by the same person. Yeah, and then the current deadline right now, as it stands, is June 1st, 2020, 4 p.m. Mountain Time. We have been getting some feedback that there are challenges with meeting deadlines like this. So we are open to potentially changing it, but one of the major points of this call is to get some more information so that we can make an informed decision on whether or not we need to change the deadline. Great. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. So first, we're actually going to talk about what are some of the challenges that postdocs are facing due specifically to the pandemic that's impacting their ability to apply for the competition. So we'll spend about 20 minutes discussing this, and then we'll move into the more general questions people might have about the competition. But we really want to get that information about what is causing any complications for postdocs due to the pandemic itself. So I want to ask and open up a few questions to you guys. You don't have to limit your response to these questions. If you want to expand on anything, that's great. But we want to know what are some of those challenges that you're facing specifically due to the pandemic, whether maybe it's difficulties with setting a start date and getting the hiring process going at your academic institution, maybe it's travel restrictions or difficulties in forming those provincial collaborations. We want to know what you guys are experiencing. We also want to know if there is a solution that you have, or if you don't, if there's factors that are playing into your ability to overcome these challenges would also be good for us to know. And also a timeline of if we were to extend the deadline, say 4 to 8 weeks, would that be enough time for you to get things going and be able to apply? We also want to know, whether or not postponing the deadline would have any negative impacts on your ability to apply. So whether or not there's restrictions from your match funding partner or funding of the research project itself that means that you can't delay applying for the funding. All right. Okay, so with that, I open it up to you. I believe you were all muted on arrival into the call, so just make sure you unmute yourself. And yeah, I would really like to hear how everything's going for everyone.
Yeah, so it's Kathy Hill here from Collaboration. I'm just wondering if you can answer a question. Has anybody applied so far?
We haven't received any applications in, but we have received a few questions about things like who the partners are, or who qualifies as a partner. And so far it sounds like there are at least a couple applications that will be submitted, I believe, by the current deadline.
Thanks.
Hi, Shannon. This is Kelly Kaiser here. I'm just wondering, and I apologize for not looking at this on the website if it's available, but is the start date for when the funding can begin, since it does have that 1-year contingency to it, is there a requirement for when the funding and the research would start due to the fact that research activities are limited right now?
Yeah, so we are open to being flexible. We have a fairly long-term contract with the Alberta Paraplegic Foundation, who are providing that initial funding for our reporting means. So we do have some flexibility of when that start date can occur, but we do need to have those eligibility requirements and match funding requirements met before we can release any funds.
Okay, so one follow-up question to that, apologies. For the guaranteed matched funding, does that need to be disclosed at the time of application, or can it be disclosed prior to the release of the funds if the award is awarded?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. So as it is, part of the requirements from our funder is that match funding needs to be guaranteed. There has to be that much funding in place. Even if that funding isn't in accounts quite yet, but if you can have a letter of support from the matched funder stating that you will receive those funds, I think that that would be sufficient, but we do need to know that match funding will be in place.
Shannon, the other alternative is that we do know that funders can shift, but as long as we do know that there is a matched partner. Now, if that partner were to change, a couple weeks later while the agreements were being drawn up, that would be acceptable to us as well.
Okay, so the specific funder doesn't need to be confirmed at the time of application. It's just that we need to have confirmed that the funds will be matched regardless.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And Shannon, that's very helpful.
That's good. Does anyone else have any comments or questions that they'd like to ask? Is there any issues that anyone is experiencing specifically due to the pandemic? So if you aren't an applicant yourself, but you are in the process of hiring a postdoctoral or a fellow and you're experiencing issues with hiring somebody, that would be really useful for us to know. We do know that there are, of course, travel restrictions in place, which makes it really difficult to confirm a start date. So this is some feedback that we have already received, but if there's anything along those lines as well that anyone else is experiencing, that would be useful for us to know.
Yeah, it's Gail again. Whoop, we're getting echo, sorry. I've not heard of any issues with regards to that, but I'm also not aware if our spinal cord injury physiatrist group are actively looking for fellowships. So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, no, that's good. Do you know if they may not be actively looking right now because of the pandemic?
I don't think so, actually.
Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah, I think one of the other comments to make is just about, research activities have been put on hold a little bit because of the pandemic. And so when we look to relaunch our current work, we're having to work through some guidelines for ambulatory services as to who can come into the building and not. So I think whether or not this type of project can proceed during these times will kind of depend on the type of research that's being proposed, because it, there will be some restrictions on patients coming into the hospital for a little while, I think. So just something to keep in mind.
No, that's great. I mean, it's not great, but I mean, just the information is helpful. Do you foresee, now that things are starting to reopen, whether or not within the summer, do you think that some of those activities will be picking up?
It's hard to say. I mean, we're trying to pick up as much as we can right now, but we're still limited as to, who can access the hospital. So again, it depends on where, what type of proposal this is. Is it a community-based one? Does it involve one-to-one visits? Is it more equipment related? It's really hard to be able to, I think we may just have to look at what's the current state in terms of who can enter hospital buildings and what some of the public health orders may mean for community-based work too.
What's your current deadline, Shannon?
So currently the application deadline is June 1st, with an expected announcement of funding, I believe, for mid-July. Again, there's some flexibility of when we can put that start date, but it'd be nice to know, like you said, that there are restrictions with patient-oriented research and community-oriented research, and it'd be really useful for us to know if anyone has anything they can expand on those specific issues that might be impacting their research. That would be helpful, so that we can use that information. So if it is, if people know that they're going to be experiencing those issues again for more than, say, 4 months, that would really delay the start date of the research, versus if it's going to begin to open up within the next month or two. That kind of information is nice to know for us. So if anyone has anything they can expand on those specific issues themselves for their research, that would be great.
So my first thoughts when you said June 1st, and you said that you had possibly the opportunity to extend the date of the applications, I think that's a must actually, because Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services, we don't even have a prediction yet for when we're going to actually be cleared to go to phase 2 of community services and ambulatory work. So it's really early to give any prediction right now, but I think by the end of June, we'll have a better feel for where things are going to be at, which then could get you more interest and applications coming forward at that time.
That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of information that will help us make a decision, because we aren't specifically involved in the research itself. So there are issues out there that we're not aware of, and things about when services are expected to reopen, or when they're expecting to make a decision, is helpful. Because we don't want to discount anyone who is doing patient or clinical research from the competition. So
that being said, Jen, we do know that the preclinical labs, the animal labs, will be starting to gradually open up as well. We've gotten soft dates, but there really isn't any firm information on how that's going to proceed or how that's going to impact people's research programs, even in the animal labs. So I do agree that June 1st seems a little overly ambitious, because it would just be way too difficult to predict how things will progress. And what kind of productivity people could have for, meeting deadlines and any deliverables for the funding.
Okay, no, that's good. So then that obviously then impacts animal research. And I think there's something similar happening at the U of A, where they haven't quite reopened yet, and they're expecting to slowly do so over the next couple of weeks. But again, I realize that will make it really difficult to have a more definitive answer of when things will pick up. So it may be a good idea for us to extend the deadline. If we were to do that, do you think it would be helpful to host another kind of Q&A session like this, say, in 4 weeks' time, to get a better idea of whether or not, I guess there's more of a plan in place for both clinical and animal research on how they're going to be proceeding for the rest of the summer?
I think there would be value to that. The meeting invitation to this actually had quite a large number of participants, and there's only 8 of us on the call. So yeah, I think to repeat it would be beneficial.
Yeah, or find some other way of getting our information.
Okay, no, that is great. We could always do a combination of people emailing in and hosting another event, a live event like this, for those who maybe can't attend. And now that we've decided to record these sessions and post them online, that might make it more accessible then to those who, and make them more likely to submit questions. Okay, great. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to expand on pandemic specifically before we move on to the more general questions? No? Okay. So now I'd like to open it up to everyone who may want to ask me questions, or Hillary, anything that is related to the competition itself. So one of the questions that I did receive through email was about the funding partner, I believe. So it was basically what was the partner organization's role for the competition. So if this is regarding the matched funding partner, they have to provide that matched funding of a minimum of $25,000 for site plan support. Again, there is that potential to use the $25,000 from us and $25,000 from your partner, and use that $50,000 to apply for a 2-year MyTax fellowship. And if that's the case, we can extend the term to 2 years. If this question is referring to the provincial collaboration, so again, this is to collaborate with somebody who's outside your municipality to promote those provincial connections. In the past, typically CAN has promoted academic provincial collaborations, but we want to open this up more broadly to include non-academic collaborations, so that you're collaborating potentially with community groups or healthcare centers or industry, wherever it makes sense, as long as it's a partner outside of your municipality. So I don't know if that answers the question that was emailed in. I hope so. If not, just let me know and I can expand further. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? So another question that I've received a couple of times since we launched the competition was about that translational component, because that can be fairly broad and sometimes considered vague. But really, it's just we want to know that you are considering how that information from your research is going to get translated across the different levels of research, or from research into application, whether it's to the market or to the healthcare system or to the community. We just want to know that you're incorporating that translation into your research from the beginning. So if you are doing preclinical research in animals and you're looking at a particular therapeutic, it would be beneficial if your research had clinical relevancy. So the timing of your therapy is given at a clinically relevant time. So not given, say, 5 minutes after injury, and consultations with a clinician or clinical researcher can really help aid that translational component. It could also be clinical research, working with a physical therapist, the ones who are going to end up using that research within building it into your research design from the beginning can also be considered a translational focus. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
No, thanks for your time.
Oh, so great. Thank you everyone for joining the call. All of the information you've given us, especially around the June 1st deadline, is really helpful, and we'll consider hosting another event like this in a few weeks if we do decide to extend that deadline. Yeah, Hillary, is there anything you want to say before we end it? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. To clarify, if you can give everyone an indication of when they may announce a shift to the deadline.
That is a great point. Yeah, so we're hoping to make a decision by the end of this week, and we will let everyone know early next week through our newsletter, as well as through our social media accounts, if there's any changes that will be made. And if anything else, you can always email me. It's swowk@ualberta.ca. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining the call and for participating.
Yeah, thanks everybody.